Hey everybody, it's Chris Harrison here with Main Place, and we have another episode of the Main Points with Main Place. Today we have Nicole Bateman with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Nicole is the president of the Economic Development Corporation of Decatur and Macon County. From this point on, we're going to refer to it as the EDC, though.
That sounds great.
That's a mouthful.
It's a long name.
Yes, it is. So again, thank you. First, tell us a little bit about how long have you been in the position of being president of the EDC?
It's been 3 years.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And how long have you been with the EDC? Because you were with it before you were president.
I was. So I started 8 years ago with the EDC.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that's wild.
So 8 years at the EDC. I first started as a community marketing manager in charge of deploying the new branding campaign for the community.
Limitless,
Limitless,
right?
yep.
Yes.
Which is ongoing, but really, big launch at the beginning and for the first 5 years. And then also took on some additional responsibilities as the executive director of the Midwest Inland Port, and then eventually became president. So, yeah.
Very good.
It's been an exciting ride.
That's great. So I think for several years, we spent a lot of time saying, what does the EDC do? And for several years, you couldn't really say what you did because there was a lot of behind the scenes conversations, and we know a lot of that is still going on. But now that some of those things are in the light and are real deals, what's happening in Decatur, and what has the EDC and other organizations helped bring here?
Yeah, that's a great question and a very good point, because I too was in the boat of, okay, EDC, how is that different from the city, and what do they actually do? And I think bringing on the marketing and branding campaign through Limitless really launched the EDC into the spotlight, since that was the kind of the parent organization that oversaw that. And we're seeing that a lot now too in economic development is communities recognizing the fact that they need to have a brand, right? It's in this new era of attracting talent, it's not enough just to be a community. You have to tell your story. And if you think about it, much of how we live our lives every day is watching stories, listening to stories, right? And on demand. And so whether that's through social media accounts or Netflix or whatever, we're out seeking what we want. Well, communities have to be out there providing that content. So then when people are looking at your community, whether that's through investment of their development projects, or
which is ultimately what
yes, what we all want. Yep. But also as residents, right? If you're contemplating a move to a new community, you want to find out as much as you can about it, not just what Google will serve you. And so it's important for communities to stay on the forefront of that. So I think that, the EDC still does that. We still manage the marketing campaign and branding campaign for the community. But a lot of what we do behind the scenes is working with companies that are interested in exploring development in Decatur, whether that be local businesses that want to expand their operations or new companies that are looking to either relocate here or expand here or start from scratch here. We're seeing quite a bit of foreign direct investment, so we spend a lot of time working with foreign companies as well on helping them to make their investment decisions and bringing those to Decatur.
Where are you finding the people to talk to? And I, being in commercial real estate for the time that I was, it just felt like it was so vast, and there was just so many options and so much direction. I mean, how do you find and how do you decide who's the right one to go to? Zane and I have talked about the eagle chasing the rabbit. They got to chase one rabbit, not two rabbits. How do you go through that decision process of who are we going to go talk to?
Yeah, so we have a couple different pipelines in which we get projects. And so one of which is outreach to companies that are in a growing sector. So we'll reach out to their business development, we'll reach out to their presidents and CEOs. We also talk a lot with site selectors. So site selection companies are these companies that the client or the company will hire to do all the due diligence for them so that they can remain anonymous through the process. So we'll work with site selectors as well. But then we also get funneled projects through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity through the state of Illinois, and also through Intersect Illinois, which is kind of like the state of Illinois' business development arm. So we are constantly filling out, we call them RFIs, requests for information. So spreadsheets and spreadsheets of information about our community, everything down to supply cost, potential vendors, infrastructure cost is a big one, and the capabilities we have here. So we fill out a lot of those. Some of those will stick and land and we'll get through the process, but often our best outreach is through connections that we have. So making sure we have solid relationships with the companies that exist here who are also talking to companies or customers that might want to come here. That is where we have some of our latest projects that we have landed have come from building those relationships.
So an organization that's already here in the community and somebody's already come to them and interested in partnering or a spinoff or something, and then the EDC gets involved to help that company really land here.
Exactly. So in two cases recently, Innova Feed, which is the world's largest insect protein plant that is building now. The steel is up, and I think the walls are going up this week. And then LG Chem as well. And so those were both relationships that we were introduced to through ADM, because ADM had a particular interest in potentially joining with those companies. And so going through the process of recruiting them to come to Decatur, just because they chose Decatur doesn't mean that we didn't have to compete for them to come to Decatur. Yes, they were going to sign joint ventures or in that process and down that road with ADM, but they could choose Iowa, they could choose any other location, right? Some of the companies, and what we find now is that we'll be working with them while they're trying to select a community to be in. And it could be working with a company that's in Decatur, or it could be working with competitor companies in other states. And so we're trying to sell the company the same time we're hoping that these other folks will land the contract, so it makes it an easy decision for them to come here. But if they don't land that contract, then they're not coming.
None of this matters.
But it doesn't matter, right? But I will say, even if we lose a project, or when we lose a project, because that does occasionally happen. The feedback we get is that they are always blown away at the level of collaboration and connections that our community has, which is great. And that the process was simple. They really enjoyed working with us, but just for whatever reasons, always out of our control, they chose to go somewhere else. So at least we're getting good feedback about the experience that they have. And I think that's really important, because a lot of these companies are small in nature and they have big growth plans. Doesn't mean that they're not going to come here in the future, right? And so if you have established a relationship with them and continue to follow their company through their growth in the future, then, you know, there's, I think, still an opportunity for them to expand here.
I think it's interesting too, you said a lot of these companies are smaller companies, which means they probably don't have teams of economists or lawyers or site selectors. And so it could be a few people that have grown this business from nothing to something, but they still don't have that human capital infrastructure in place. And that's probably where coming to the EDC of Decatur-Macon County is very valuable, because they can come in and go, we need help. We need help. And, you know, whether it be city or water or taxes or environmental, I mean, I can really imagine a company coming in and going, we need you. What can you do for us?
Definitely. So, and making those connections for them, and workforce development is a huge part of that, right? And so a lot of times what we find too is they come in, sometimes they're not sure exactly what they'll need the basic stuff, right? Infrastructure, things like that, but where to find the other pieces, they're not sure. But as I always tell our clients, is how I refer to them, think of the EDC as your community concierge. What do you need? How can we connect you? How can we make that happen? And that's really the approach that we take to all of our projects, which is what I think has set us apart from the feedback I'm receiving, is that approach, that helpful approach, is what sets us apart from the experience that they're receiving in other places. But I also think that speaks to just Decatur's nature, right? In general, we want to be helpful. We want to be good neighbors, and we want to see people succeed. And so that they feel that when they come here and through the process, and even after they commit to coming here, it doesn't mean that they're up and ready to go. There's a long way before they even break ground. And so sticking with them through that process and helping them along the way is an important part too. Our job is not done when they sign the letter of intent, or when they sign or they purchase the land to come here. I mean, we're with them all the way through, and really through their entire time here. I mean, we work with existing businesses too, right? And they have just as much of a need for the EDC as the new guys do. Sometimes the new guys, it's a heavier lift, right? Because they have more to do, but you know, everybody comes to EDC for something at some point, which is great.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's fun.
So give us some headlines. You mentioned LG Chem and Innova Feed. What are some of the other, successes that we've had that are public? I know you've got some, still behind the scenes. So what else is coming to Decatur? Because we've got a kind of a skyline view here, and there's some cranes, people come up and go, what's happening there and what's happening there? So it's kind of fun to see, but what is happening?
It is fun to see. So there's a lot of expansion going on right now. You'll see a lot of that on the ADM campus. And so they are increasing their alternative protein capacities. And so there's a lot of construction there. They're putting in an alternative protein, more research and development center around that as well. There's a lot going on that side, on the northeast side of town. But if you look in recent years, a number of years ago, Fuyao came to Decatur, right? They purchased the old PPG plant. They are constantly adding and expanding and putting in new lines. And so while there might not be a crane outside, there's a lot going on in the inside.
Right.
Caterpillar has continued to add on. They just added a warehouse. We've had 2 additional warehouses, FedEx, Cardinal warehouse on the northeast side of the community as well.
And those are big warehouses. Those are big. 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 square foot warehouses.
Yes.
And I know, I've been in real estate 10 years now, and right before I started in real estate was when they opened the inland port.
Yes.
And I remember thinking then and kind of putting the pieces together, like, what does this mean? What's going to happen? What is it going to look like? And it's, it takes time, but like, there's warehouses out there now. There's expansion out there. There's people importing, exporting now. And so, these things take time, and we've got the Farm Progress Show coming up. So talk about just a hub of activity of what's happening. There's so much going on.
There's a lot going on. We added up the numbers the other day, specifically for Farm Progress Show, but we have had over $3.6 billion of industrial investment in the past 5 years. Billion with a B.
In 5 years.
In 5 years, 5 to 6, yeah.
That's outstanding.
It's a lot. And the amount that we have in our pipeline right now that could land, not all those will land, a fraction of them will land, will be even greater than that. So it's exciting. I think, and I sat in this place too, living in Decatur, where you'd see stuff happening, but it didn't seem super relevant to what I was doing. So I didn't really know about it, or I didn't understand what an impact that's going to have on the community. Sitting in this seat, though, I can tell you that influx of investment is getting attention globally. When you start having companies from outside your area, so not your existing companies, but when you're starting to attract new investment, and when you're starting to attract foreign direct investment, LG Chemical, Innova Feed, that is huge. That is huge. And in those industries, Decatur's getting a ton of attention, and it's what we've been working for, right? We've been working at this for a solid, I'll just say 8 years, because that's when we really started to put in our marketing plans and really got very aggressive about it, and it's paying off. But to your point, it is a marathon, not a sprint. Right? We announced the Midwest Inland Ports. We start marketing. 6 years later, we're starting to see it, right? It just now I will say that intermodal ramp, though, has been a great success. They are pulling in freight from not only the Midwest, but even beyond the Midwest. Companies are finding it either cheaper or faster and clearly more convenient to be shipping their imports and exports in and out of Decatur rather than going to a more congested port in a larger city. And so while we knew it would be beneficial for our region, really having it as a play for the whole Midwest has been helpful because it keeps those companies here, right? Logistics and transportation. If we learned nothing during COVID, right, about supply chains, I think that's where one of the, every day in our lives, we were all affected by supply chains. Well, companies that were already using the intermodal ramp were in a really good position. Companies who weren't are really starting to, again, look at the supply chain and making sure that, now hopefully that was a once in a lifetime deal, the pandemic, but it did disrupt supply chains, and that is a very top factor when you talk about location decisions. And so having that as an option, even if the company isn't importing and exporting now, knowing that would be available to them in the future as they grow is really, really key.
Yes. And I think, what I want to point on again is PPG,
Yes.
or Fuyao.
Yep.
That's a plant that's been here. It is here, isn't going anywhere. It's on the south edge of town, right by Mount Zion on Elwyn Road. Lots of people work there. Lots of people are going to get new jobs there, and good high-paying jobs too, and will continue to have jobs there that are, people want longevity. They want to stay in a place and be comfortable and grow their life around that. And having, the work that you've done to help Fuyao continue to reinvest in that plant is it's outstanding. It really is.
It's a team effort too. I mean, the EDC can't take all the credit for that. There's a lot of players at the table, but it's fun to be part of that. And I think what we're finding is employers, another thing we work on heavily is workforce investment and coordinating workforce activities and helping to make sure that companies know where their workforce pipelines can be, but also recognizing that the workers today are not those same workers that we had 40 years ago, right? Their needs are different. Their wants out of life are different. And so constantly assisting companies in learning and kind of keeping up on those workforce trends is important. And, you said employees want longevity, and they do. And for companies to start recognizing, chart out those pathways, right? Show what those look like in your employee break room so that because we do have a lot of jobs in Decatur, it's easy for someone to quit here and jump over here and make another 50 cents an hour or $1 or whatever it is. If we want to start keeping our employees where they're at and growing that base and creating that longevity, charting out those pathways is important. And thankfully, when you look at the community as a whole and all of our companies, you can have a really long career in the same community. Maybe not working for the same company, but there are a ton of pathways here. And I think it's a great place to live for those reasons too.
Yeah. And I said employees want longevity.
Yes.
The companies want longevity too. I mean,
They
that
certainly do.
experience, that knowledge base. And we're seeing that and hearing that in the trades too, who's the next generation of plumbers or electricians. And so we need that too, in whatever the field is.
Absolutely. We need more workers. Everybody does, right? This is not a problem unique to Decatur. I mean, it's all over the U.S., right? But what I can say is I think that we have been really good at being nimble, especially Richland Community College, in adapting to what our workforce, where our workforce is at, and the demands of our current companies, and what's coming down the pipeline. They're one of the first at the table whenever we bring a new company in. How can we custom train? What are you going to need? Let us help you get prepared for that. So Richland Community College has been a really fantastic partner, but I think in all of their efforts to, bring folks in and do all these different certifications and trainings, we need to continue to do that, and companies need to continue to support that because at the end of the day, they're getting the product that they need, and connecting those relationships has been a big part of what we've been, always keeping our ears open for and participating in as well.
And again, having Richland say, what do you need? Okay, we can build a program to that.
Yes.
And that's so valuable in this evolving economy.
Yes, I think the worst thing we can do is say, well, it's different, but we prefer it the old way and not evolve.
Right.
I mean, you might as well just pack up shop and leave. Like that cannot be the attitude, and thankfully that's not the attitude. Right. So it's a can-do attitude, and what do you need and how are we going to make it happen? I think we see that in a variety of ways, but specifically when it comes to workforce, that's increasingly important to make sure that we're successful in that.
So what's the future? And so as far as what you're working on that you maybe can't talk as much about, what are the trends? What are you seeing as our entire economy and industry evolves into the future?
So sustainability is a really big focus of companies now. For some companies, it was always a focus, and for others, it's has to be a focus because of policies that are changing, right? But in their efforts to adapt to that, they are really looking at what we have here in Decatur, right? So not only between the carbon capture and sequestration, which is huge and an important factor, but the synergistic companies and a community that is also looking at sustainability and clean energy. When they come to Decatur and we talk about what the city's doing with, eventually putting solar panels over covered parking at the Civic Center, right? Or the hybrid buses and just, a lot of different those efforts that maybe the company is not going to utilize, but they know that they have a city that's forward thinking in that manner. That matters. Locating near synergistic companies that also are conscious about their carbon footprint, important to them. It's really interesting because that has changed very rapidly. That was not even a conversation 8 years ago when I started. And in the past recent years, it makes sense. Changes in administrations will ebb and flow with these types of things, but sustainability is important in anything we do, right? I mean, we learn to recycle as kids. I mean, we learn, it's like it's always been there in some form or fashion.
And now when you cringe when somebody doesn't, you're like, what are you?
I know. I'm like, we can reuse that. Yeah, it's like put it in the recycle bin, right? Yes. I love our big recycle tote at home. Yeah. I mean, there's, it's always been a factor, but now it's a financial factor, and so companies are really looking towards communities and solutions. Utility partners like Ameren, who can provide clean energy, they're looking towards that. And Decatur's just in a really, really good position to be having those conversations. So we are having a lot of those conversations with companies, which is great. I also see a lot of, in a similar vein to what we have had our roots in agriculture, but fermentation and biomanufacturing. So we actually just partnered with the University of Illinois and the
when you say
so the Decatur EDC, and the Champaign County EDC, and the University of Illinois, and their integrated bio research laboratory on bioprocessing research laboratory, IBRL for short, on the University of Illinois campus, just partnered on a federal grant application to be the recipient for a grant to grow our ag tech corridor between Decatur and Champaign. It makes a lot of sense. We've been informally promoting this for a while, but this was a really good chance to really hone in on some very key innovative technologies that are growing and have a huge future in front of it. And so we're looking to formalize that a little bit more through some strategy grants and then hopefully some implementation grants alongside our partners in the ag industries between our communities. So, it's going a little bit above and beyond now what our typical course of business, which was, keep the companies we have, make sure they have what they need so they can expand here. Now let's start bringing in some new companies, mix it up a little bit on the diversification front. Like, what other companies do we need to be in here to kind of, even out the field here so that we don't put all of our eggs in one basket. Decatur put all of its eggs in one basket decades and decades ago, and we see how that could be very detrimental when you have a downturn, right? So really kind of looking at diversifying a little bit and then really honing in on these growing technologies between fermentation and biomanufacturing, electric vehicle manufacturing, and component manufacturing. I mean, a lot of that, it's emerging, but it's emerging out of stable, known industries, right? The automobile industry, the agriculture industry. I mean, this is what we do here. I don't know if traditionally we've thought of ourselves as very innovative, but there has been innovation taking place in our community for decades. We just have to get back and being loud about how we're positioned for that. And I think we're positioned for some really good growth in those two specific sectors.
Absolutely. Well, I think back to, really 15 and probably even 20 years ago when I first came, but really 15 was when I started paying attention. And there was just kind of we don't know what to do. We know we need to do something, and we know we don't have what we were, but what do we do? And just hearing you, and I know you could go on for a long time, and what's interesting too is you're Decatur and Macon County, but you're Central Illinois, you're Illinois, you're Midwest, you're regional in that. Because all these synergies need to be in place, and transportation and logistics and partnerships. And so what's great is that Decatur gets to be the hub of that. and having you as the concierge to that hub for these companies is just, I wanted people to know how fortunate we are to have what we have, with you and the organization and all the other partners too that
Definitely.
are working together. So,
well, thank you.
Yes.
It's, it's an honor to be able to gain the trust of these companies, because when they come in, they're secret, right? They're quiet.
And they've been somewhere else too.
They have been somewhere else.
Somebody else has already taken
Yes.
golfing and wine and dine.
Yep. And so we need them to just focus our efforts here. And I think we've been really good at that. But as you said, and as I said earlier, it's a team sport,
Yes.
right? There's no way one single organization could do this on their own. But I think that's what we have been really good at in this community, is being collaborative and coming together and very welcoming. And that is really starting to, it's starting to pay off, and it feels really good.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, that's very good. And look forward to having more conversations about all the good things that are happening. So thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
To check out past or future Main Points, find us at YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts.